guys, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to share with you all the books that I read in the month of March. So remember back in January when everybody was like, oh man, January was a month. Like, whew, I'm so glad that's over. Well, March came in and was like, hold my beer. I don't think I have to go into detail about how crazy March was. Yeah, we all know that March has been totally nuts. And April will probably still be a little bit on the crazy side, but as far as reading goes, I did get some reading done, though I have to say, like a lot of people, when things really started getting crazy, I couldn't read. It was really hard to focus, to get lost in a book because I was just thinking about everything that was going on. So, and then I also found that as things kind of took that turn, I was reading through a different lens. Every little thing I was reading, I was kind of putting it into the scope of what's going on right now. So like if I'm reading a book about this huge party or like a big event, I'm like social distancing and just like weird things like that. So it definitely has affected my reading in ways I didn't think it would. And I'm sure that will continue as things progress. But yeah, I managed to read 7 books. Not too bad. 4 of them, I believe, were middle grade, 4 or 5. I can't remember. So I did a great middle grade March, and I read a couple extras, and then there were 2 that I started in March but didn't finish, and I totally forgot to mention them in my April TBR. But they are books that I definitely am going to finish in April. I just didn't want you guys to think that I forgot about them or that I wasn't still planning on reading them. The first one is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I have about 200 pages left. Hello, Fuzz. I have about 200 pages left and loving it. Absolutely loving it. It's been a ride. That's all I'll say for now. And then the other one I'm currently reading and will finish in the next few days is Nevermore The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. I had intended to finish this one in March and it just didn't happen, but I am really enjoying it. I'm a little more than halfway through it. So this was supposed to be a middle grade March book. Just didn't quite happen, but I will be finishing in April. All right, so on to the books I did manage to complete. I'm gonna start with the middle grade books because of middle grade March. It was a goal of mine to fulfill the challenges. And even though I didn't complete Nevermore, I did manage to complete all of the challenges. So go me. So the first one that I will talk about is linked to the first challenge, which was to read a book with illustrations. And so for that one, I had intended to do Nevermore, but I'm gonna go ahead and use Fenway and Hattie by Victoria J. Coe. And this wasn't on my TBR, but my daughter's school at the beginning of March, they started this whole thing where, because March is like reading month, they wanted the whole school to read this book together. So every family got a copy of this book, and then they had, you basically read a chapter a day, and then they had like a little calendar where every day they did some sort of fun activity at school that was related to the book. It was really cute. Unfortunately, it was cut short by the pandemic, but Leia and I continued to read it, and we did finish it this month. So this one has little like drawings at the beginning of each chapter of our main character, Fenway. He's a dog. And yeah, this is just a story about a dog named Fenway and his owner, Hattie. And it's told through his perspective, and so some of the stuff he says and does, it's really cute because you think, oh, that's probably how my dog like views the world. So like, for example, he calls like the mom, he calls her the food lady because she's the one who always feeds him. The dad, he refers to him as fetch man because he always plays fetch with him. He calls the kitchen the eating place. It's just like, it's cute, kind of stuff like that, and just the way that he sees the world, it's cute. But the story basically evolves around the family picks up and moves from the city to the suburbs, and it's kind of about them adjusting to that, and about how the move affects Fenway and Hattie's relationship. So it was cute, but I also I don't know, it was a little bit too simple for me. I was a little bored. Leia seemed to like it, and even there were times when I was reading it that Hunter would sit down and listen to it, but I don't know, I didn't really feel like it like really taught any sort of like lesson or anything like that. It was just kind of a silly, fun sort of book, which I guess is good for people that, like, if you're really trying to get your kids engaged in reading, by all means, like, and this is something that interests them, then yeah, do it. But for me, it was just kind of meh. So I did end up giving it 2 stars. I definitely have read better middle grade books, but I did appreciate that the school went out and sort of did this thing to try to get everybody into reading, which obviously I'm always appreciative of, but it just like didn't quite hit the mark for me. So for the next challenge for middle grade March was to read a book that dealt with stories or books. And so we read The Land of Stories, Book 1, The Wishing Spell by Chris Colfer. And this book was so much fun. It's about a pair of twins, Connor and Alex, and they get this book from their grandmother that is a fairy tale book, basically. And they quickly discover, though, that you can travel through the book and go into the fairy tale world, where you have all of these fairy tale characters that we all know very well. We have Snow White, Cinderella, Rapunzel, the Big Bad Wolf, and just, you know, all these fairy tale characters that we all know. And they live in this really cool place called the Land of Stories. And it's just about how they get there and their journey to get back home from this place. And it was so much fun. I really enjoyed this, and so did Leia. It was a bit on the longer side. It's like 430 some pages, which is kind of long for a middle grade book, but we took our time with it. We've been reading it for a couple of months, but we did complete it in March. And yeah, this book was really fun. I want to read more of the series. I think there's like another 5 books, and then I think there's even some kind of offshoots that have to do with this too. So yeah, highly recommend this, especially if you're into fairy tales. I think you would really get a kick out of it. And yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next challenge in middle grade March was to read a mystery, so I went ahead and read a Goosebumps book. I read Say Cheese and Die by R.L. Stine. I actually listened to this one on audio. It was a really quick audiobook, like 2 hours long. There's a lot of Goosebumps audiobooks on Scribd, so if you're interested in taking a trip down memory lane and listening or reading some Goosebumps, that's a good way to do it. This one deals with a camera that our main character Greg finds that when you take a picture, it shows you something bad happening to whatever the subject is in the photograph, and then that bad thing comes true, right? So it's all about this camera and where did it come from and why does it do that and all that fun stuff. So this was a fun one. Pretty interesting premise, something that you would probably see on like the Twilight Zone or something, but obviously like it's made for kids. So yeah, this was a fun story. I enjoyed it. Typical Goosebumps fashion, there's those like cliffhanger chapters pretty much at every chapter. There always seems to be like a friend group where there's like, you know, at least like 2 to 3 boys and a girl. That was totally happening here. So yeah, there was, it was fun. It was Goosebumps, what can I say? So yeah, I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Not the best Goosebumps book I've read, but it was still a lot of fun. I almost forgot to mention that this one also fulfilled the challenge to read a book-to-screen adaptation. I did not get around to watching the Goosebumps episode of this or the Goosebumps movie, but I would love to eventually because I think it would be a lot of fun. And then the final challenge for middle grade March was to read a book set in another country. So I read Snail Home by C.L. Williams, and this book takes place in medieval Britain, and it is about a young girl named Wynne who comes across this little community like of tiny people. They're like this big, and it's just like, yeah, this little town, but it's very small, and they are soon in danger of being destroyed. So Wynne goes on this quest to try to save them, basically. And so this was pitched to me as a book that's like The Hobbit meets The Borrowers, and that's exactly what it was. It's very much like an adventure kind of road sort of story. They're on a quest to get somewhere, but you know, little people like The Borrowers. So this was fun. It had some pretty cool like fantasy and magical elements to it. There were, at the beginning, the first probably half of the book, there were these kind of like interluding little chapters where for a long time you didn't know who the person was, because it was from a totally different person's perspective, and it seemed to be like a completely different story. And so that was a little bit confusing, to be honest, because I didn't know what was going on. And eventually that gets explained, but I feel like middle graders reading this might have also thought that was a little weird or confusing. So, but other than that, I really had no complaints about this. I thought it was fun. Like I said, had some great magic and such, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, so those are all the middle grade books that I read for middle grade March. So overall, great middle grade March month because I completed all the challenges. I read 4 books. It was a good time. So now I'm going to talk about the ones that I read that were adult books. The first one is A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum, and I listened to this one on audio, and it's interesting because 2 of the books that I read here had some very similar themes going on, but I'll talk about this one first. This one deals with a family that is, they're immigrants from, was it Pakistan? Oh my gosh, I can't even remember now. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so this one takes place in Brooklyn, New York, and also for a little bit in Pakistan. It deals with a generation, it's like a generational type of story. So you have different perspectives from different women within this family. You have, in present day, Brooklyn, New York, you have Dea, who is a high school, I want to say she's a senior. So she's about 17, and her grandmother, Farida, is trying to match her with a husband, an arranged marriage, and she's very, resistant to that. She doesn't want to do that. She wants to go to college. She wants to educate herself and kind of live her own life, and her grandmother is not having it. So you have her story, and then you also have her mother's story, which takes place about 15 to 20 years before the present day, and it's kind of the same situation. It deals with her mother getting married to her father, coming to America from Pakistan, and having children and things like that. And then the third person that you meet and that perspective you get is from Farida, Dea's grandmother. So you get all 3 of these women's stories, and though they are very intertwined, they are also different, and their voices are very distinct. And this book was so good. It touches on so many things. It touches on the pressures of certain family expectations and cultural expectations, and that kind of pull between cultures, because they are, though she is proud of her heritage, she also wants to, live her life as she wants to live it, which is more of an Americanized version of, a more Americanized woman, and her family just doesn't understand. And so you have that kind of push and pull going on between that, between the characters and what they're expected to do and what they want to do. And it was fantastic. There's also a little bit of a mystery sort of element, because at the beginning of the book, that Dea's parents have passed away, but there's so much like hush hush about what happened to her parents, and so she's kind of trying to figure that out too. Like, was there something more going on with her parents' death? And so, yeah, this book was really good. I really liked the audiobook. 3 separate women read for each character, and yeah, it was really good. I don't know what else is more to say about it except that it was fantastic, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So then, kind of in that same vein, I read another book that also dealt with like the same sort of themes having to do with cultural expectations versus what you want to do, and especially also kind of having to do with women and young girls and what's expected of them in certain cultures versus what they want to do. That book is The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare, and this one deals with a Nigerian girl named Aduni who at a very young age, I believe she's 14, she is married off to a much older man to become a third wife to this man. And her father does it because he needs the money and because that's just kind of what they would do in her community. And she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to become a wife. She doesn't want to have babies. She wants to go to school and further her education. And again, her family is having none of it. And it's just about her journey through being put into this very difficult situation and overcoming it. And what was especially awesome about this book was the way in which the book was written. And I have to say that when I first started the book, I was a little bit, I don't want to say put off, but it was kind of jarring the way that the book was written, because it is told through Aduni's eyes, and she's telling you the story, and she's telling you it in a very, what's the word? It's kind of like broken English, jumbled language, because that's the way that she speaks. And as the book progresses and she kind of finds her voice and she starts to educate herself more and things like that with the help of some other people as along the way, the narrative changes and the way she speaks changes. And it was just such an interesting way to tell that story and to bring that point home. And I really ended up loving that facet of the book. This one was very good. It was hard hitting at times. There's, you know, trigger warnings for rape and abuse, all kinds of abuse, just a lot of things like that. So just kind of go into it knowing that it is going to touch on those topics. But this book was really well done, just really well done. So it was interesting that I read these pretty much back to back. I was like listening to this one and then also kind of reading this one physically. So I was getting a very similar story, though from completely different, you know, areas of the world and whatnot. But seeing that there are women in various cultures and in various situations that are, you know, seemingly different, but are dealing with the same sorts of issues. So it was really interesting to read these. And yeah, they were both really good. This one I also gave 4 stars to. Highly recommend. It was very good. And then I finished out the month by doing an impromptu buddy read with Bobby from Bobby Reads Too Much. We decided to kind of spur the moment buddy read This House is Haunted by John Boyne. We have buddy read 2 John Boyne books in the past, and for both of us, this was our 3rd John Boyne book. And so I think it's going to kind of become a thing that we try to buddy read all of his books together, just because why not? We're like on trend to do that, so let's do it. Why not? So yeah, she ended up getting a copy from her library before the libraries closed down, and I ended up getting the ebook on my Kindle because my husband got it for me when I told him I wanted to buddy read it with Bobby, but wasn't able to get a copy of the book. He gifted it to me as an ebook as part of my birthday gift. So yeah, so we decided to buddy read this book, and it's basically, it's very much in the same vein as Turn of the Screw and Turn of the Key, and it even kind of has a little bit of like a Rebecca sort of vibe going on to it, kind of that gothic kind of setting, because it deals with a young woman who, after suffering a family loss, she leaves London, and this is like late 1800s, I want to say. She leaves London and goes to become a governess and at this huge house for these 2 children, and the like, what do you call him? Like the man of the house or whatever isn't there, and she's just kind of there with the kids, and there's nobody else around except like a handyman that lives on the property, and he's just kind of doing his own thing. And she quickly realizes that there's some supernatural forces at play within this house. So in that sense, it's very much like the Turn of the Screw. And for me, this book was a lot better because I think this book in many ways just fixed everything that I thought was wrong with the Turn of the Screw. I felt like the Turn of the Screw left too much out Like nothing was explained, and I was very frustrated reading that book. In this one, I loved the story. I loved that it kind of played on the role of parenting in the book, because you have our main character who had recently lost her father, and so she's constantly remembering him and reflecting on their relationship, because her mother passed away years prior when she was a girl, so it was just her and her dad. And then you also have within the house these two children, and you get you slowly learn throughout the book what their relationship with their mother was like, and you do find out what happened to the parents and why they're not there. And you just kind of can't help but compare those two parental relationships and how they differ, and in some ways how they are the same. And then you also sort of see the way that Eliza, the main character, is with the children, even though she's not a parent per se, she is a caregiver, and begins to have a very, sort of paternal feeling for these kids. So it was really interesting to see all of that. It was interesting to see the ghosts. There were definitely some, in the beginning, there were definitely some like kind of creepy moments. The setting is very gothic in this big old house with like secret passageways and stuff like that. So that was reminded me a lot of Rebecca, in the sense that there was very gothic setting. So yeah, it was a fun read. It really was. And I love John Boyne's writing. So I knew going into it that I was going to enjoy this, and I did. It was a good ghost story, with a little bit of heart, which is always nice to see. And yeah, it was a good one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. All right, guys, so those are all the books that I read in the month of March. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Let me know how you did for middle grade March if you took part, because I would love to hear about that too. Yeah, and let me know how you're doing, because I would love to know. I know things are still crazy and definitely on the upswing, but we're hanging in there. We're hanging in there, and it's gonna be okay. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. So yeah, I hope that March treated you well, despite everything. And obviously I hope that April is a better month for everybody. Yeah, so stay healthy, stay sane, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.